So our first company presentation today will be Integra Resources, and presenting on the company's behalf is the company's Executive Vice President, Josh Serfass. Josh, welcome to the stage, sir. I got a laser here if you need one. Okay. Just hit the green button. Advanced slides here. If you need to go back, it's right there.
Okay, perfect.
That's all
Thank you.
20 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Serfass, as Eric mentioned, and I work for Integra Resources. Rich, I'm glad that you were up before me and said you were a gold bug, because after Chris said he put a sell on golds, I wasn't quite sure what I was doing here, you know. But no, but thank you, everyone. I'll take you through the story. If you have any questions, I'll be around, obviously, the next 2 days. Happy to I'll keep it high level, but if anyone wants to get technical, I'll be around and happy to do so. I will be making forward-looking statements, so this is a long cautionary note. Now that we've put out a pre-feasibility study, our lawyers have added a second page. But quickly, and a great tangent from Rich, which is management companies. And part of the Integra story is the Integra team. Integra's been around for about 10 years, first as Integra 1.0, as we call it, which was Integra Gold. And then in 2017, we started Integra Resources. Integra Gold was quite a success. We took a project in northern Quebec that had been a mine, a very famous mine called the Lamaque mine, from the 1920s until about the 90s. We acquired it, believed that there was more gold and silver there, made a very large discovery in 2018. We bought a mill in 2014, bought a mill out of bankruptcy not long after that. And then we were actually building the underground portion of the mine when Eldorado Gold, who at the time owned about 15% of us, came in, acquired the remaining shares. It was quite a nice premium in 2017 of 52%. The key here, number two, is that they brought it into commercial production in 20 months. So that means the mine that we had put forward, the mine that we were building, it worked. And that's not always the case. And you can see that there's been a lot of acquisitions in the gold space, 52, give or take. 16 of those are in production. So it's always nice to have that management team that is taking the steps to actually bring it into production. So on the back of that story, the management team all got pink slipped. They kept our technical team. And we decided we felt, we had a very good blueprint for advancing in the mining industry what we call brownfields projects. So projects that were mines at one point that were shut down for a variety of reasons. And so we started looking really across the world for another similar project, something that had been in production, had a lot of exploration upside. And we found it at a place called Jordan Valley, which is just in the southwest tip of Idaho. It was a producer from the 1970s to the 2000s. It produced about 50 million ounces of silver, about 750,000 ounces of gold. Kinross was the last operator of the project. They closed it in 2000, not because they ran out of gold, but because the gold and silver price at the time made it very difficult for them to make any money. So we came in, acquired it, and have since done a lot of work, which we recently put out a pre-feasibility study. And I'll take you through what gets us really excited about this project. I put this slide together thinking I was going to be brilliant, and then I realized that a lot of this show is going to talk about these things. But before getting into the project, sort of setting the stage of what we're seeing, especially in the U.S., domestic production becoming a big focus. Obviously, the supply chain has really brought into focus the need to mine this stuff here, whether it's precious metals, whether it's energy metals, all the things that we need as a country to move forward. Then we saw the Biden administration, and I know this will be a topic tomorrow, which I'm quite looking forward to, make the stance that we need to produce this stuff here. It doesn't necessarily apply to precious metals, but I do think in the future, having a domestic supply of gold, a domestic supply of silver is an important thing for America, for the U.S. And then obviously the big theme, which Chris talked about in the beginning, which is, inflation, stagflation. Where does this lead us? And for us, one of the big things for us is that we have a large supply of this in America. It's 5 million ounces of gold equivalent, so that's gold and silver in Idaho. For those of you that don't know much about Idaho from a mining perspective, it's known as the gem state. It's one of the oldest industries in the state. It still has a very active silver camp in the north near Coeur d'Alene, a very large phosphate patch in the eastern part of the state, and we hope to be the next return of precious metal mining in the state in the next couple years. So why do I think it's important to have this? Well, obviously a strategic supply of gold is always important, and having a large domestic supply in Idaho is great. We also have, I like to joke that it's a gold project with a silver lining. We have a very large endowment of silver, about 126 million ounces. That is a big component to the renewable future, to solar panels. And having access to silver within the states, I think is really important. And there's more to be found. So one of the things that we really like to talk about, especially at this project, is we acquired it from Kinross in 2017. There was no resource on it. We had a back-of-the-napkin idea of what was there. We put our first resource out in 2017 at 2.8 million ounces. We updated the resource this year, just under 5 million ounces. So we've raised a lot of money to advance this project, and we're discovering ounces of gold for about $12. So that's a really good return if you think about how much money we spend on exploration. We're getting an ounce of gold for approximately every $12 we spend in drilling and exploration. So it's a really nice metric. There's a lot more gold and silver to be discovered here. A lot of our resources around what was mined historically, we've really quadrupled our land package, and we're going to add a lot of silver here in the near term. So what is the project? We put out a pre-feasibility study pretty recently in February. It looked at a large heap leach and a mill scenario, so that's just the processing. We've since revised our strategy to focus on the heap leach, which is a very common way of mining. It's very common in Nevada. Essentially, you just are piling rock on large pads and then treating it and removing the gold from the solution that comes off of it. Our strategy is to get the heap leach into production, and then once that's permitted and in production, to look at the larger expansion scenario, which includes this mill. If you believe and if you want to invest in projects in the U.S. that are heap leachable, there's not a lot of them, and that's really what this slide is showing. There's 3 undeveloped heap leach projects that are in permitting currently in the U.S. Delamar, GSV, Goldfield, Orla's in Mexico, they're in production. You can see from a life of mine perspective, so how much ounces we're producing, we lead the pack there. And this is, again, just the heap leach only. It's also a very profitable operation. So that chart on the bottom that you see there, AISC is just a fancy way of saying how much it costs for us to produce an ounce of gold, so all in sustaining cost. So you can see for us in the heap leach only, $814 is what it takes to get that gold out of the ground and processed. When gold's trading at $1,900, $1,850, you can see we're producing a lot of margin at this project. From an endowment perspective, so this is total resource on the project. That goes back to that 5 million. You can see compared to our peers, especially in the western United States, there's not a lot of large scenarios. Now, our heap leach in particular recovers about 1 million ounces. That's what we want to permit first. And then when we get bigger and permit that mill and expansion, you bring in a lot more silver, you bring in a lot more gold, you produce a lot more. Just to give you a sense of what the project looks like, so that picture at the bottom is actually one of the 2 deposits on the project. It's called Florida Mountain. It's semi-arid, high elevation, think 6,000, 6,500 feet above sea level. You can see where Kinross mines. So this was a very active mine. So when you think of permitting in the U.S., which is going to be a topic that's discussed tomorrow pretty extensively, one of the things that we think sets us apart, at least will help us through that permitting process, is that this was a mine. This isn't, beautiful forest that's going to be opened up. This is, an open pit that will be reopened and essentially just expanded as we move forward. So to break down the project in the most simplest form, it's really 4 key points. It is a pre-feasibility study, so that means we can start our permitting process next year of a simple heap leach with a mill kicker, as I like to say, which we can add on after we're in production, after we've permitted the heap leach. A very large resource, you can see there it's broken down between gold and silver, so it's about 2.5 million ounces of gold, 126 million ounces of silver. And that's primarily in the measured and indicated category, which just means higher confident level of gold and silver in the ground. And then as I mentioned, a lot of exploration potential here. Our focus over the next year will be expanding the heap leach, so the stuff that can go on these big piles and you can treat a little bit easier. And we're going to do that through some Florida Mountain exploration, some Delamar exploration, and then a few greenfield targets. And I'll take you through where all those are in just a moment. And then again, the key here is our path to construction is now set. So with that pre-feasibility filed, we'll file our plan of operations, which is the formal start of permitting in next year. And then we'll go through the process of the review of the permit, the plan of operations, the environmental impact study, and then the anticipation that in late 23, early 24, we would see our record of decision, which is that permit to actually begin construction. So the heap leach is the real financial engine of the project. It's an 8-year mine life. When you add the mill on, it becomes a 16-year mine life. But we're going to permit the heap leach first, and there's a few reasons for that. Heap leaches, we believe, just a bit easier to permit, especially in the state of Idaho. There's no tailings facility. There's no mill that you have to permit. Essentially, you're just permitting a large pad and a smaller processing facility. The former governor of Idaho, Butch Otter, is on our board, and he's the one that's really helped us with this strategy because, for him, once your operation is in production and you're employing people, you're paying taxes to the state, it's a lot harder to then say, oh, we're not going to permit your expansion, because then all of a sudden you're putting these jobs in question, you're putting the tax revenue in trouble. And so this is the plan, is to get that heap leach up and going. I broke down the NPV and IRR of just the heap leach on this slide. You can also look at the NPV and IRR of the whole project, the PFS, on our website. But we will produce 1 million ounces. It's only $270 million to get it into production. And where our real focus is, our exploration focus over the next 12 months, will be extending that heap leach mine of life, continuing to feed the financial engine of this project. Now, these slides get a little bit colorful, so I apologize if they're a little bit busy, but these are the 3 main targets for expanding our heap leach. This will also provide a lot of news flow, drill results news flow, which is for a company, a non-producing exploration development company like ourselves, is really the lifeblood. We put out some drill results yesterday. We saw a positive reaction in the market, which was great to see, despite obviously a very wild day in the Dow and the S&P, but a stronger gold price. So the first place we're going to look for more oxide to go to that heap leach is Florida Mountain West. So Florida Mountain is one of the deposits on the project. It has 1.1 million ounces of gold, silver equivalent. It's sort of tough to see. It's that blue line there where it says Florida Mountain Block Model. To the left of that, to the west of that, there's been some historic drill results from the Kinross days. We've done a lot of work at Serfass. We think we can quickly add a couple 100,000 ounces of oxide that we can bring in to the mine plan. The second really interesting target is called Black Sheep. This is a greenfields target, which means that there hasn't been historic mining here, at least any modern mining, that is. There is some mining that dates back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, some very high-grade mining. We've done a lot of the early stage work here. We'll bring a drill in. You can see some of the drill holes that we've done, which are Milestone and Slaughterhouse Gulch and Lucky Days. Again, it's just another area where we can add a couple 100,000 ounces, but probably the most exciting and the lowest hanging fruit is the historic waste rock pile. So as I mentioned, Kinross mined here for 20 years, or they were the last operator. They produced about 50 million ounces of silver, 3/4 million ounces of gold. They were producing at a much higher grade than what we're producing at. And that's one of the trends in mining, is you're seeing a decrease in grade because the easy stuff has been mined. So Kinross mined at 1.2 gram gold, 75 gram per ton silver. Our mining average is about 0.6. 0.5, so lower than that. So essentially all of the things that they were putting into the waste rock piles, that they were putting into low-grade stockpiles to wait for the gold and silver price to come up, is now in today's era very, very profitable gold and silver. So there are 60 million tons, which is a lot of tons of rock, that are sitting around the project. And our plan is to go and drill that and get it into a resource. Kinross did drill this in the late 90s. They put 12 holes into one of their waste dump piles, which you can see at the bottom there. It was about 0.63 gold equivalent, which is about where we're mining, which is really encouraging to see. And where those piles are all over the project. So there's 4 here at Delamar, which are all the colorful piles you see there, and then 2 here at Florida Mountain. The Florida Mountain is where we'll focus because they were high grading this back in the 2000s and the 90s, which just means they were going after the highest grade gold to make the most money given the gold and silver price at the time. So this material is going to be slightly higher grade. It's where we'll start drilling. The beauty of this, and not to get too into the weeds on mining, but this rock is already broken up. So, I like to joke that mining is essentially the efficient movement of broken rock. Usually you have to break the rock yourself with dynamite. This stuff is already broken up because this was mined historically by Kinross, but then put into these waste rock piles. And so when we drill it, and we do the metallurgical work on it, there's a good chance that we don't have to crush it any further. This is what's called run-of-mine rock, so it's about 8 inches crushed. We may not have to crush it anymore, which is great. You could just throw it on the pads. More to come on that, but we do think that this is the way to quickly add, call it 2 to 3 years of heap leach mine life to the project to then further complement the future milling scenario here. So and I think, Eric, am I okay on time? Okay. So quickly to wrap it up, obviously with a mining company, we always want to talk about the upside potential. We have a very economic PFS, we have a very economic mine here, and now where do we go? Where do we make this even better? Obviously that low grade, that heap leach stockpiles are the lowest hanging fruit, but we also have some really interesting high grade potential. So if you're a history buff, read about the battle under the mountain, which was a very famous battle that occurred in the late 1800s under one of the deposits on our project called War Eagle, or I should say one of the targets. In the late 1800s, a battle broke out over these high-grade veins. And by high-grade, I mean they were mining about 1 ounce per ton material, so bonanza grades by today's standards. 2 rival mining companies were on both sides of the mountain, underground by about 400 feet. They had come to an agreement to leave a wall in between their 2 mining camps. At some point, while mining at night, someone broke through the wall, and I'm not even kidding you, a massive gunfight broke out. And in fact, there's a piece of timber underneath the mountain that's still there that allegedly has 2,000 bullet holes in it because they were fighting over this high-grade gold. In fact, the state of Idaho had to send up the National Guard. There was another firefight in the local town called Silver City, but it was finally quelled. But it gives you an idea of the potential of high grade here, especially when you think about the grades they were mining, 1 ounce per ton, ½ ounce per ton cutoff. We've drilled 110 hits below Florida Mountain into a similar high grade system. Those hits were we have about 4 grams per ton over 1.5 meters, a lot of higher grade hits in there. So this is upside for us where in the future, as we continue to advance this project, we could, in theory, put together a high grade resource here to bring into future mine plans. The Bureau of Land Management, who is the federal lead agency on our project, they actually gave us the permit to do an underground exploration program. Again, for us, that's just a good indication that for responsible mining, the BLM, especially in a place like Idaho, is very active and supportive of future mining. The second really interesting aspect for us, and this is work that will continue, but again, the focus is on that heap leach, is the Albion process. Albion is just a technology to increase recoveries, especially on certain types of mineralization, particularly sulfide. It's used about 6 mines around the world. Glencore does own the technology. We're doing the work on it. But what we saw when we used this is there are some areas on the project that we excluded from the mine plan because of recoveries. But when we used the technology, we were getting about 80% recovery. So we're going to continue to do the work on this, and this will be part of future expansion potential in the future. Just to give you an idea of what some of that future expansion looks like. So that big chunk, which I call the blue whale, is a couple 100,000 ounces of sulfide material that's excluded from our mine plan that could come into future mine plans as we permit the heap leach and then move ahead. So to wrap things up, this is what we're going to be doing this year, is we're going to continue to advance the oxide, the heap leach targets around the existing resource. We're going to drill those waste rock piles where we think it's the lowest hanging fruit to add some significant years to the project. And then we will continue to de-risk. So our baseline studies, which is what we need to start permitting, I'll wrap up this summer. Then we file that plan of operations next year and get into the formal permitting process with the hopes that by 2024, we would have our construction decision. During that time, we're going to continue to explore. We're going to continue to release news releases about drill results, because that really is, as I mentioned, the bread and butter of exploration and development stories moving ahead. This is on our website's changed a little bit, but we're heavily covered both in the U.S. and Canada by research analysts. And if if anyone wants some more information on that, just feel free to reach out to me or talk to me here. But thank you again so much for taking the time. I guess I'm honored to be the kickoff speaker here, and I look forward to chatting with you all throughout the next day and a half. Sure. Any quick questions? Oh, well, that was easy. Oh, one question. Great questions. We have about 10 million US in the bank. That will see us through the summer, but certainly we'll have to raise this year to advance through the next stage of exploration and permitting. Thanks, Josh. Thanks. Oh, and actually, sorry, one more thing. Since we're in Chicago, Core Mining, who is actually based here, Coeur d'Alene, they own 6% of us, so they're a supporter of the stock. Yeah, sorry, can't believe I forgot it. But yes, so they like what we're doing. They see a lot of comps to what they have in Nevada and Alaska. Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.